Oh, that is so admirable. Man, if you don't get the hell out of here, take your behind to Puerto Rico. We are fine. There's no reason why you can't go handle your business and come back, because we'll be here. This is Bedtime Stories, Grown-Up Edition. Short story, Irreconcilable Differences, Part 1. When season 17, Resurrection, ended, there were quite a few relationships that were on the brink. Wood and True had been reunited, but what the future held for the couple was still up in the air. Big Wood wasn't willing to tell True why, when he faked his death, he allowed her to believe the lie too, unless she was willing to tell him what she'd done with Brutal Bosch while he was providing her with security, and they both were under the impression that Big Wood was dead. And True wasn't willing to commit to giving their love another try without knowing for absolute sure whether Big Wood had set her up. He knew her, and he knew Brutal Bosch. And based on both of those reputations, it wouldn't be hard for anybody to imagine that, left alone in a cabin in Denver, Colorado, the two freaks would find themselves in one another's beds. As far as True was concerned, it was very well possible that Big Wood had taken advantage of the fact that Brutal Bosch had been assigned to secure True and put that man up to seducing her in an effort to prove that she was unfit for leadership, solely to prevent her from continuing her efforts to serve as Stephanie's right hand. After she gave birth to their son Genesis, Stephanie was pursuing the role of Queenpin in the Lopez organization. And several years before, she'd asked True to take that ride with her. Big Wood had no issue with that when the two initially began their romance. But when he found out that she was going to be the mother of his child, he'd wanted her to choose retirement just like he had. Circumstances had put him back in the game, but as far as he was concerned, that was going to be short-lived. His number one priority was family, and becoming a father meant that everything had to change. And just like all the other women who had designs on leadership in the Notorious Five Families, True was not of that same mind. Yes, family came first, and she was going to be a mother, a damn good one. But she was going to have both: a successful career as a criminal and the life with her man and her baby. And her plan didn't even change when she thought Big Wood was dead. She had no plans on getting out of the life, despite the fact that his death made her a single mother. So his resurrection certainly didn't change that plan. And she'd concluded that Big Wood had set her up in order to change her plans. And whether she was going to give their love a second chance or not was greatly dependent on what she found out. But she wasn't willing to do what he'd asked. She wasn't going to tell him what she'd done with Brutal Bosch in exchange for that information. Instead, she called her BFF Stephanie and told her to have Brutal Bosch get in contact with her ASAP. At the time, though, Brutal Bosch was in New York City on an assignment, and Stephanie had told her that it would be some time before she heard from him. He'd also cautioned her that that might not be the hornet's nest she wanted to disturb, because Big Wood had had a conversation with Brutal Bosch right before he went to Denver to be by True's side, and he had told that man to walk away if he wanted to live. And there were only a few ways that True and Bosch being in contact with one another could work out. He could end up dead. She could end up dead. Big Wood could decide to move on, or all of the above. But since True was a daredevil, she decided to hedge her bets. And after giving birth to Genesis and getting an update from Stephanie about what was going on with the Notorious Five Families, True was anxiously awaiting Brutal Bosch's phone call. No matter what Big Wood intended, she was absolutely not going to allow the fact that she had slept with Bosch stop her from being Stephanie's right hand. Between her, Stephanie, and the general stacks, those who were lower on the totem pole of the Lopez organization would absolutely respect her, because they would ensure that there was no doubt about her fitness for the job. And she was not going to allow the differences between the sexes and how fraternization would be handled if she was a man stop her from being all she could be. In her brief discussion with Manny, he told her that he had no doubts about her competence, and he agreed that what she did in her personal life shouldn't have any impact on her leadership. But he also told her that that was not his battle to fight. It was hers. In the same way that he was the only one who could manage his reputation among the rank and file, she was the only one who could manage hers. While Manny's confidence in True hadn't been shaken, he didn't miss the opportunity to let her know that she'd made her own job harder Having had his mother at the helm of the Lopez family and his older sister, he had no problem with women in leadership. And having grown up knowing the Queen Mother and Catherine, he knew firsthand that women were more than capable. But he couldn't control the opinions of others, not even those who were in his employ. True knew that Manny was completely right. She'd already had one situation where she had to lay down the law as it pertained to her personal life and as it pertained to the soldiers knowing her reputation and thinking they could try her. She put several men in the dirt and had Stacks reorganize her direct line of supervision. It didn't help, though, that Layla, one of the lieutenants that she'd put in place personally, had put herself and her direct team in a position to be royally embarrassed at the hands of True's other best friend, Rennie, for almost the same reason why True's leadership was being questioned. Layla had allowed her personal feelings for Stacks to get in the way of the business. As a result of those feelings, she wrote a check that her behind couldn't cash, because Rennie mollywopped her behind, all up and through Bellamy's, on the island of Puerto Rico. And for good measure, Rennie beat the snot out of her crew, too, all by herself, with a little chemical assistance. Rennie had obtained her bachelor's degree and a master's degree in biochemical engineering, and while she was not employed by the Five Families, she'd become the family's go-to when they were in need of chemical expertise. And as a result of Rennie having put Layla and her crew to shame, Layla had been demoted, as far as True and Stephanie were concerned, and Manny. Layla's emotionality had put the women in the Notorious Five Families back 5 steps and behind the 8 ball. Because no matter how much work the women put in, it was still a man's world. No matter how well the organizations guarded information, gossip was still like a locomotive that had gone off the rails. And that was another reason why True wanted to have a conversation with Bosch when he'd left her in Denver, because he'd been pulled from the assignment. Instead of going on to his assignment in New York, he'd shown up in Puerto Rico, demanding answers. He'd committed to remaining with True and providing her with security until Big Wood returned from Operation Last Touch in Dallas. And he'd promised that man that if for some reason he didn't return, or his return was delayed, he'd be there for the long haul. He'd be right there with her to ensure that Big Wood's son was born safely. And while he didn't hesitate to pack up his things and leave when Stacks pulled him from the job, that did not change the fact that he had questions and he needed answers. If they reasonably expected for him to break his promise to Big Wood. His reasons may have been pure, but it was not hard for anyone who was at the Lopez complex in Puerto Rico to see the love written all over that man. And then all it took was for folks to put 2 and 2 together and put together what they knew about Bosch being a ladies' man and True being the queen of one-night stands to conclude that something had went on in Denver. And it was more than the ambush at Stephanie and Angela's estate. When True and Bosch survived that ambush, they were relocated to the cabin in Denver that Big Wood had purchased. And while no one other than Stacks and very select members of the Lopez organization knew where True and Bosch were held up, it was clear when Bosch came through like a wrecking ball that wherever they'd been having a good time. And it was assumed that Bosch was upset because that good time had come to an end. Then, to add insult to injury, Brutal Bosch left Puerto Rico and went to Denton. While everyone in all of the organizations had been led to believe that Big Wood was dead, he was actually in hiding at the family complex in Denton, Texas. The highly secured family complex was covered in soldiers, and even they didn't know that Big Wood was alive or that he was there. Hell, most of the family at the complex had no idea that he was alive and there. And within 24 hours of Bosch leaving Denver, going to Puerto Rico, going to Denton, and leaving Denton, the soldiers who'd seen Bosch running around on a tear had conferred with one another and put 2 and 2 together. It really wasn't all that hard to figure out, because Brutal Bosch left Denton, Texas with a broken wrist, and within hours of his departure, the man that they all believed was dead walked out of his mother and stepfather's house at the family complex and got into a chauffeured car, rode to the private airstrip owned and operated by the Lopez organization, and got on a plane to Denver. And while every soldier who laid eyes on Big Wood was sworn to absolute secrecy with the promise of death as punishment if their lips got loose, there was still pretty loud whispers about a very pregnant True being sexually involved with Bosch while Big Wood was alive. And these were the unintended consequences that True hadn't considered. But she was convinced that Big Wood, whose professional forte was psychological warfare, had absolutely considered it. In fact, she figured that that was exactly how he'd hoped it would work out. While most people in the life had no clue about how True operated in relationships or her penchant for sexual freedom, they absolutely knew that before she was in the running to be Stephanie's right hand, she'd already made a name for herself as a finisher under the moniker Yael and a few others. And while it was not a requirement, it was pretty common for finishers, both male and female, to use what they had to get what they wanted. True absolutely could have opted out of using her sexual wiles in her position as a finisher, but she, like Selima, Samuel's daughter, who was in the running to become the queenpin of the Baptiste organization, had absolutely no problem taking a nigga down before taking that nigga out, or taking somebody down to get information, gain their trust, and get their guard down. And doing so had no ill effects on a female finisher's reputation in the life. As far as everybody was concerned, male and female, business was business, and that was business. But for as much as the five families tried to treat men and women as equals, women who got around for the job got a pass, and those who got around because they wanted to get around were not respected. In the same way that women are often accused of sleeping their way to the top in any other line of business, men in the criminal underworld had been known to be guilty of the very same thing. True had gone to great lengths to make it clear to those who reported to her that trying anything like that would be a wasted effort. And right before she stepped up to the plate, Big Wood had tried to back her up by making sure that everybody knew she was his, and anybody who tried her was going to have to see him. True did not take kindly to that fact. She'd put her men in his place, and the generals and lieutenants that he'd given the speech to in theirs. And now, hindsight was 20/20. Big Wood had had good reason to interfere in her leadership. And now, after both of their efforts had actually been successful, True was right back where she started. If Big Wood had had the presence of mind to give that little Easter speech back in the day, he certainly had to know what would be at stake if she slept with Bosch. Especially considering the fact that after she was in the running to be Stephanie's right hand, she'd accepted an assignment that included seducing Amir, the former right hand of the deceased kingpin Nigel St. James. And when she'd done that, she had to keep the fact that she was on assignment under wraps. So once again, the rumors had started circulating that she was cheating on Big Wood with Amir. It wasn't until after her assignment was complete and Amir was dead that everyone who'd been speculating learned that that was in fact an assignment. And Big Wood knew all about it. The only problem was it was shortly thereafter that it came out that True was pregnant, and questions about her baby's paternity became rampant. The only person who wasn't questioning it was Big Wood. And that was among the thoughts that were running around True's mind as she held her 3-day-old baby in the hospital in Denver. She was also thinking something that she would never say out loud. She was thanking God that Big Wood was still alive. But it was undeniable that if Big Wood had not resurrected himself and True and Bosch had ended things amicably, no one would have ever found out about their little situationship. And in True's mind, that was even more reason to believe that that was Big Wood's plan all along. And that was why True was pissed. No, she wasn't regretful. When her fiance Bo died, when she was in college, she decided two things. She would do whatever made her happy, and she'd never make the mistake of falling in love again. When she agreed to undergo training to be in the life, she had finally chosen a career that made her happy. And the only promise she'd made to herself that she didn't keep was the one about falling in love, because she'd fallen head over heels in love with Big Wood. Benjamin Woodrow Stevens Jr. was like none other. And if you asked him, he'd tell you that True Joy Burton was the truth. And now that Genesis was born, there were still questions about his paternity. True knew just by looking at Genesis who the boy's daddy was, and she wasn't worried about proving that to anyone other than Wood. And she was under the impression that he'd seen the results of the in utero DNA test that she'd had Maribel perform. She'd had Maribel upload the results to the secure server that she was using to communicate with Big Wood when she was first in hiding and before he'd been shot. And while talking and holding their new baby, she found out that the man had never even opened the file. And he just told her that he never needed a test. He'd known that was his son before he'd seen his face. And had he had any doubts, seeing his son and seeing his mother's reaction to his son would have squelched them. Because Miss Charlotte was in love with her brand new grandson. A baby boy who she said was not only perfect, but was the spitting image of his father when he was born. And she had the baby pictures to prove it. The only thing that he had that he didn't get from Big Wood was True's golden eyes. And since Wood had brought him into her room after he'd been born by C-section, thoroughly examined by the NICU, Neither Big Wood nor Miss Charlotte or her sister Indira had given the new mother and brand new baby a minute's peace. When she closed her eyes, they were there, and when she opened them, they were right there. She'd only been able to get rid of the three of them for a few minutes so that she could do a three-way FaceTime with her two best friends, Stephanie and Rennie. And after showing them their brand new nephew and seeing her brand new niece, whom Stephanie had given birth to only weeks earlier, because everybody and their mama around the family had been pregnant, everybody except Rennie. Stephanie gave her an update on the business and informed her that there were rumors about her baby's paternity, where questions had originally been whether Amir or Big Wood was the baby's father. Bosch had been added to the mix, and True was pissed. And it was when she shared that little tidbit with Big Wood that she found out he'd never opened the DNA test. He also told her that he had opened the results from the DNA test that he'd done with Amira, and True almost passed out, because that broad and her baby had both been sent to the pearly gates. And to date, not a soul knew that True was the one who sent them there. Of all the things they discussed over the last few weeks, Amira's disappearance was not one of them. And since Big Wood had brought it up, True figured she'd better ask some questions. She said, "What do you know about Amira's disappearance?" And Big Wood used the tablet that he needed to communicate with ever since he survived being shot in the alley during Operation Last Touch, fell, hit his head, and suffered a traumatic brain injury. An injury that had gone undiscovered for hours, because doctors were focused on saving his life and repairing the damage that was caused by the bullets that tore through his shoulder, chest, and thigh. In the end, he was left with a limp and a condition called aphasia that affected his ability to speak. So, tablet in hand, Big Wood told True that he knew what everybody else knew about it. He also knew that if the information included in the letter was in Amira's mother, Mrs. Ali, received in the mail, or even remotely true, every one of the heads of the 5 families would have moved heaven and earth to find her. They would have had to, because they would have needed to keep their secrets safe. And dead or alive, they wouldn't have allowed a child of his to be out in the world unaccounted for. When True asked if Big Wood had looked into it, he used the tablet to tell her that when he told Q that True had been in Dallas when she was supposed to be in Denver, Q had asked Sax if it was worth looking for Amira. And Sax had said he could confirm that she'd expired. But that was a secret that should only be revealed on a need-to-know basis. And when True and Big Wood locked eyes, True knew there was nothing else that needed to be said. She also knew how her man felt about deleting fetuses and how he felt about Amira and having a baby with her. So she said, "We all thought you were dead, Wood, and we thought it was her fault." And she was shocked and relieved when he said, slowly, "You were doing your job." And then he used the tablet to say that there was no other way that it could have ended. True quickly changed the subject by saying, "Well, Stephanie told me something else that I found interesting. She told me that you've been provided a unique opportunity in Puerto Rico, and you declined." When Big Wood was 8 years old, he and his sisters had been victimized by a man named Leroy, who was supposed to be Big Wood's father's closest friend. Big Wood had unalived that man, and the man that he was working for had been handled by the Baptiste family. The man over that man had been behind the attempted kidnapping of Big Wood's best friend Q's oldest daughter, Melissa. That man thought that he would get Q and his team at the FBI to stop investigating cases that were connected to the international trafficking organization that he was one of the heads of. Instead, that was the start of an all-out war between the Notorious Five Families and the international trafficking organization. Big Wood had suppressed memories of what he'd done at 8 years old. And through some very well-executed therapy techniques, Manny Lopez's oldest daughter, Dr. Miranda Lopez, was able to help Big Wood recover those memories. The dots were connected and it was on. What he'd done at 8 years old and the effective job that Q had been doing with the feds were the reason why Jerry Rouse and his co-conspirators had decided to wage war on the Notorious Five Families. It was the reason why Amira had drugged and taken advantage of him, how she'd gotten pregnant in the first place, why True had been in hiding in Denver, and why Big Wood had been shot. It was also the main reason why he'd faked his own death. And if you watched Resurrection, then you know that it was Big Wood who'd made the connection between the kidnapping of Michael's girlfriend Tamara, who was the daughter of the chief of the Denton Police Department, with her father's connections to the international trafficking organization. In an effort to rescue his girlfriend, Michael had done some hacking, and his hacking resulted in the connection being made between Donald Green in New York, where Bosch was on assignment, to Johnny Decker in Houston, Texas, and to Tamara's father, Chief Camp, and to Michael's arch enemy DeAndre's father, Congressman Hill. Both Donald Green and Johnny Decker had been identified as Jerry Rouse's co-conspirators. They were also heads of the International Trafficking Organization, and when we left off, the head honcho was the only one to yet be identified. Jerry Rouse was incarcerated, but somehow he was still pulling strings from the inside. Johnny Decker was in the hands of Q and Stephanie in Puerto Rico. And 3 days later, it had gone down. Not only had Tamara escaped her kidnappers and been reunited with her family, but both DeAndre's father and Tamara's were being investigated by the feds. Donald Green had joined his friend Johnny Decker in Puerto Rico. And like Johnny Decker's baby mother, Donald Green's wife Camille was also in the hands of the Lopez family. Big Nate had been freed because he was kidnapped in name only, and the head honcho had been identified. Unfortunately, though, he was in the wind. Both the Five Families and the feds were trying to locate him. If the feds found him, he'd be going to a federal prison. If the Five Families found him, the jury was still out on what they would do. Because there was a complication. In the meantime, though, Q would have been remiss if he didn't call his best friend and brother and offer him the opportunity to handle Donald Green and Johnny Decker personally. When True asked Big Wood why he passed up the opportunity, Big Wood told her using the tablet that he'd vowed not to leave her and their newborn's side, and he was going to keep that promise, not even getting retribution for his father's murder or for the abuse that he and his siblings suffered as children could supersede his responsibility to her and Genesis. And True said, "Oh, that is so admirable. Man, if you don't get the hell out of here, take your behind to Puerto Rico. We are fine. I got your mother and Indira staring at me every time I blink. I got Maribel refusing to go back to Texas until after we're discharged from the hospital. And since Indira couldn't keep her big mouth shut, I have our mother begging and pleading to be included. I think I have all of the help that I could ever need. And I honestly don't need this much help. I'm damn near fighting for my life just to hold my own baby. I'm starting to think I should have decided to breastfeed after all. But I didn't want my baby to be so attached to me that I couldn't get in the field when it's time. I get that breast is best, but ain't none of y'all turning down an opportunity to stick a bottle in this boy's mouth. So clearly I made the right choice. I'm saying that to say that there's no reason why you can't go handle your business and come back, because we'll be here." Big Wood used the tablet to say, "You just want me to go so that you'll feel better about going when you're ready." True said, "I don't need no excuse, just like I don't need permission. When it's time, I'm going. In the same way that I'll be right here with our son while you go and handle your business, when it's my time to go, you'll be right there with our son. And if not you, then your mother. If not her, then the grandmother crew. I don't plan on living in Texas, but I have no problem with leaving my baby in Texas while I go handle what I'm responsible for, just like any other mother who goes to work every day." Using the tablet, Big Wood said, "I know damn well you're not comparing getting in the field. We're going to a 9 to 5 every day." True said, "No, but there are women in the military who get in the field too, and they have to leave their children for months at a time while they go work for Uncle Sam. The only difference between me and them is the employer, and the fact that, unlike their employer, my employer would make sure that my son is taken care of if for some reason I didn't return from war." And all Big Wood could say was, "Touche." True said, "So that said, what time does your flight leave? Because I'm sure you can go handle your business and be back before me and Genesis are even discharged from this hospital. According to Maribel, we'll be here for at least another day. Do you think it'll take more time than that?" Big Wood used the tablet to say, "I might be walking a little slower and having some difficulty with my speech, but I still know 500 ways to kill a man." And when their conversation ended, Big Wood kissed True and Genesis. And as he made his way to the private airstrip, he called Q and said, "You still got that saved for me?" Q said, "I do." And Big Wood said, "My nigga."